Hello and welcome to my brand new channel on the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm Gravish. Here we will examine key issues related to this violent conflict which has existed officially since 1948 when the Jewish state of Israel was founded and which has recently boiled over, resulting in the vicious cross-border attack by Hamas which led to the murder and death of over 1,000 Israeli men, women and children and the taking of hostages. However, the conflict between Jews and Arabs and Jews and Muslims in the Middle East long predates 1948, and it is critical to understand the origins of that historical conflict in order to understand the events taking place today. The reason I decided to start this channel is because I believe the public is highly misinformed about the true facts surrounding this conflict, and that an informed public is critical to ensuring that the violence between the two groups ends as swiftly as possible and that a lasting and meaningful peace can ensue. Today's topic is the question that can Israel make peace with Hamas, but this very question was the subject of a recent hour-long debate between Mosab, Hassan, Yousef and Cenk Uygar which aired August 9, 2024 on YouTube channel Open to Debate. In this video I will summarize the arguments made in that video so that you can understand both debaters' main points without spending an entire hour listening to it. I will include commentary expanding on the topics raised by both debaters, including comments on the strengths and weaknesses of both parties' positions as I see them. I hope you enjoy this video and I look forward to your feedback, which you can leave in the comments section below. If you have any special requests, topics, issues or questions you'd like to see a video on related to the Israel-Palestine conflict, feel free to add them to the comment section. I hope you enjoy the video, and as always please like and subscribe so that I can grow this channel and increase the quality of this content. The following clip contains Cenk Uygar's opening statement. Please listen closely.
Your chance, please, to tell us why.
Yep. So can Israel make peace with Hamas? Of course. That's who you make peace with, your enemies, not your allies. This is actually pretty elementary. No matter how bad the enemy is, at some point, if you want to get to peace, and that's a big if, then you're going to have to do it with your enemies and not allies. So if Israel wants to do a peace deal with Norway, that's not really going to help them. They can get there pretty quickly, but that's not the issue at hand. They're fighting Hamas. That's who they have to negotiate with, and that's who they have to get to an agreement with. And sometimes when you reject out of hand any discussions at all, under the rubric of we don't talk to evil, it turns into a disaster. Why? We know it already happened. Dick Cheney said that after 9/11 and our invasion of Iraq, Iran actually offered to completely eradicate their uranium program and wanted to get to the negotiating table with us. And they had a terrific offer, according to the reporting at the time from mainstream media news sources. And we didn't even get to find out what it was because Dick Cheney had this insane idea that you don't negotiate with your enemies. Well, then who do you negotiate with? It's absurd. Honestly, this is one of the easiest questions of all time. If you say you don't want to negotiate with Hamas, all you're saying is, I don't want peace. I prefer permanent war. So when you look at the idea from a different perspective and you say, well, okay, some things are so evil and terrible, and Hamas is, that you can't possibly negotiate with it. Well, under that same rubric and logic, you could certainly argue that you shouldn't negotiate with Israel. They've killed 35 times the number of civilians that Hamas did in this conflict. Imagine if Hamas had killed 35 times the number of civilians Israel did. So that would be a giant number. What are we talking about? Nearly 1 million people if you took the 40,000 people that Israel has killed in Gaza and multiplied it by 35. And you could say, oh my God, Israel, I can't believe how awful they are. And their civilian casualty rates are as bad as Hamas's. Hamas on October 7th was terrible. I condemn it 100%. My heart breaks for every civilian who's killed. I'm the one guy who's consistent on this. I don't want any Israelis killed. I don't want any Palestinians killed. And so as terrible as that Hamas attack was, well, their kill ratio was 71%. They killed 815 civilians and 1,139 people overall. They killed a lot of soldiers as well. Now, none of that excuses any of their actions. But when you look at Israel's kill ratio, if you assume that every man in Palestine that they killed is a terrorist, which is an absurd, unconscionable assumption, Israel still had a civilian kill ratio of 60%. So when you include the innocent men, that's going to be a higher kill ratio of civilians as a percentage than Hamas. So under this logic, the Palestinians should say Israel is so evil that we cannot negotiate with them. All right, now we're at a standstill. Nobody's negotiating with anyone. This is absurd. This is not how you get to peace negotiations. And can peace negotiations work? Of course. You know who's it's worked for before? Israel, when they negotiated with Egypt. And at the time, the hardliners, just like today, said, oh, you can never trust Israel. Israel led the invasion of Israel. Egypt led the invasion of Israel twice. They were the leader of the Arab nations. They want to kill us. They're so anti-Semitic. They want to kill all the Jews. You can't negotiate with the Egyptians. They'll never follow through on any of their agreements. Well, it's been decades and decades, and they totally followed through. There was no bombing afterwards. Peace worked. It's actually very elementary. You make peace with your enemies and then see if it holds. That is what has been done every single time. It's absurd to think otherwise.
Thank you, Cenk. And
what you see on your screen right now is a breakdown of Cenk Uygar's arguments as set forth in his opening statement, which you just viewed. I find it helpful to read what people say because it allows for a more accurate analysis. Sometimes a person can sound convincing because of the way they look or sound or present themselves, but when you read what a person has said on paper, it is stripped of all accoutrements, therefore highlighting its substance. Cenk's first and primary argument is that Israel has to negotiate peace with Hamas because Hamas is Israel's enemy, and you have to negotiate with your enemy to make peace. I'm not a professor, but I do have a law degree, and I passed my state's bar exam on my first attempt, so I'm reasonably familiar with making persuasive and compelling arguments, and most importantly, I'm familiar with how to properly support them, to wit with direct evidence if possible, and circumstantial evidence when necessary here. Cenk's first and primary argument is shockingly unpersuasive and very weak. This is because it is based on circular reasoning, it is tautological, and it is represent the logical fallacy known as the false dichotomy or false dilemma. Without getting into the minutiae of those concepts, the main point to understand is that what Cenk is saying is that the only way to make peace between two enemies is through peace negotiations. However, this is on its face false. That it is false is not up to debate, and the history of war is a testament to its falsity. There are countless examples in history in which war did not end via peace negotiations between the parties, but through war which resulted in one party capitulating to the other side's demands because, for whatever reason, it has no desire or capacity to continue fighting. Examples of this are many, but a few compelling examples are World War II, the Civil War, and the Revolutionary War, all of which concluded with one side surrendering to the other. In these wars, peace negotiations were not possible, and one of the reasons for this was that they were wars between competing ideologies. World War II was a war necessary to destroy the extreme and vile Nazi ideology, one which the Germans would never negotiate on. The Civil War involved Southern ideology, which accepted and relied upon the slavery of black people. The South would never give up their slaves as they were central to their existence. The Revolutionary War was a war in which the nascent American colonies revolted against colonial British rule. The British would never willingly give up its colonialist grasp on the nascent American colonies through peaceful negotiation. The only way to resolve the ideological differences inherent in these three wars was through war itself, and with one side ultimately defeating the other side, thereby forcing surrender. Furthermore, despite not involving peace negotiations, the peace that resulted from each of these three wars has remained steadfast until today. Additionally, none of these wars could have been avoided or ended if the warring parties got together to work things out via negotiations, simply because there were no negotiations to be had. When ideologies are so diametrically opposed such that the existence of one necessitates the annihilation of the other, the coexistence between the two simply is not feasible. It's not within the realm of possibility. The Nazis were not going to concede their goals of world domination and genocide of the Jews, Gypsies, Slavs, and homosexuals, and everyone else they considered subhuman. The Southern states were not going to give up slavery, and the British were not going to give freedom to the colonies. Anyone who argues that such peace negotiations would have avoided the extraordinary death toll inflicted during these wars fails to grasp the concept of diametrically opposed ideology. Hamas's war is clearly ideological, as Hamas itself is an ideology. This is no secret. It is not about creating a sovereign state for Palestine. It is not a national movement, as is the PLO and Fatah. Hamas has made their intentions and their ideology quite clear to the world. Their objective is a global Islamic caliphate, and a caliphate doesn't permit the existence of sovereign states. Hamas's ideology is also premised upon the annihilation of the Jewish people. Hamas leaders have made this clear to them. Jews are, and I quote, filth, dogs, pigs, a cancer on the earth, and most importantly, enemies of Allah and his Prophet Muhammad. But don't take my word for it. Just listen to what they say, what they write, and how they act. Those three things, when examined together, render a crystal clear picture of Hamas' ideology, and it is more than obvious that even the idea of a sovereign Jewish state stands in diametrical opposition to Hamas. Later in the video, I will provide many examples of Hamas leaders proclaiming this ideology unabashedly to their Muslim audience. Moving to Cenk's second argument, that when warring parties don't negotiate a peace, something terrible always happens. The evidence Cenk then offers is somewhat difficult to pass, but what he seems to have said is that the post-9/11 invasion of Iraq, which was based on the idea that Iran had weapons of mass destruction, could have been avoided with peace negotiations with Iran because Iran offered to completely destroy their uranium program, but Dick Cheney refused to negotiate with Iran because he said they were too evil to negotiate with. And now, whether this is true or false is the topic of perhaps numerous books, so I won't get too deep into this argument. Personally, I did not know that Iran played a significant role in the Iraq War, or if Cenk meant to say Iraq. However, suffice it to say Cenk's secondary argument, if you don't negotiate with the enemy, something terrible always happens, isn't germane here, because the Gaza War began October 7, 2023 in an operation named by Hamas as the Al-Aqsa Flood. The word flood, of course, stems from Hamas' stated goal of drowning Israel and all its citizens in the Mediterranean Sea, of cleansing from this word the people who they describe as filth, pigs, dogs, and cancer. This vile notion of drowning and flooding Jews and Israelis has found a home in Palestine's now westernized and globalized chant of "from the river to the sea," the true meaning of which only a few seem to fully understand, but whom many falsely proclaim is an innocent chant about creating a sovereign state for all people on the land between the River Jordan and Mediterranean Sea. The notion that this chant includes freedom for Jews and Israelis is asinine. Now, it is simply common sense that it is a moral imperative to attempt to negotiate for peace in order to avoid potential war in the future when such negotiations are feasible. But this general truth just does not apply to the Gaza war, because of two key reasons. One, the terrible thing in Cenk's argument has already happened and it can't be put back in a box or apologized for or negotiated away. Hamas launched its genocidal cross-border attack on Israel without warning October 7, and Hamas and Israel have been locked in vicious warfare for the past year. Now, I know many people believe this war began 57 or even 75 years ago, but the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the question of whether or not Hamas was justified in initiating the current war is subject matter that I may delve into in future videos. But one thing is beyond dispute: Hamas did not exist until 1987, and Israel has not been at war with the Hamas organization until after October 7. The issue of occupation is an issue I may delve into in future videos. 2. The second reason Cenk's argument does not apply to the current war is that Hamas's ideology simply does not permit them nor any Muslim person to negotiate peace with Israel, and this comes clearly from the mouths of many Hamas founders, leaders, and spokespersons, beginning with Hamas' religious founder and leader Sheikh Ahmed Hassan and continuing to its current leadership, but it also comes from its 1988 founding charter. For example, Article 12 of Hamas' Charter instructs that resistance to destroy Israel is of the individual duty of every Muslim, and that even if a woman can go out to fight the enemy without her husband's permission. Hamas' charter instructs Palestinians to raise children to wage jihad against the Jews. See Article 18, and warns Palestinians that peace negotiations, peaceful solutions, and normalization of the Jews are forbidden, and that anyone who engages in them is a traitor destined for hell. See Article 13. I will address Cenk's third and fourth arguments together here, because neither argument relates to the debate question which asks, can Israel make peace with Hamas? Cenk's third argument is that Israel's refusal to negotiate with Hamas is evidence that Israel does not want to make peace and prefers permanent war. This argument is both 100% hypothetical and 100% unsupported, because it's premised on a situation where Israel has refused to negotiate with Hamas, which is, as we all know, untrue. Israel has been and continues to engage in negotiations with Hamas to end this war. Israel has offered Hamas the option to put down its arms and return the hostages in exchange for a cessation of all hostilities. That Hamas has refused Israel's terms is not evidence that Israel refuses to negotiate or that it desires permanent war. The idea that Israel desires a state of permanent war in Gaza is highly cynical, completely ludicrous, and not based upon reality, so I won't waste much time to explain why. Suffice it to say, Israel has nothing to gain and everything to lose from a never-ending Gaza war. And practically speaking, Israel has much larger enemies than Hamas that it needs to protect itself from and which pose existential threats. So ongoing war with Hamas in Gaza is obviously not a desire for any Israeli. Cenk's fourth argument posits that if you have a policy of not negotiating with extreme evil ideologies, then Hamas shouldn't negotiate with Israel. While this argument is non-responsive to the issue, can Israel negotiate with Hamas? Cenk obviously raises it because it provides him the opportunity to attack Israel and to try and shift blame of the current war from Hamas to Israel in order to pander to his base. After all, the argument has no bearing on the subject matter of the debate. Because this argument is off topic, I won't get into how Cenk attempts to support it. Cenk's fifth argument is, if both sides refuse to negotiate, there will be a standstill and war will continue forever. Again, this argument is not relevant to the topic of debate. Can Israel make peace with Hamas? Analyzing the status of Israel's military campaign to destroy Hamas is highly complex and beyond my knowledge or understanding, and my guess is it is beyond Cenk's as well. Suffice it to say, Cenk offers no evidence or even argument in support of this argument. Instead, Cenk makes the supposition, which doesn't support his position actually, that there's no way to accurately gauge the success or failure of Israel's campaigns, and that there's no way to know how many Hamas fighters Israel has eliminated because, as he argues, Israel cannot be trusted. Cenk's sixth argument is that Israel can make peace with Hamas because Israel has already made lasting peace with Egypt. This argument is unpersuasive for reasons I've already set forth above. Namely that, however, that Hamas and Egypt are two very different enemies. Egypt, which is a sovereign state and not a terrorist organization funded by a foreign state, did not have a sworn agenda or ideology to annihilate Jews in the state of Israel. In fact, the same Egypt that Israel negotiated with to cease their hostilities was the same Egypt that literally went to war with and expelled the Muslim Brotherhood and criminalized the entire organization. And for those unfamiliar with the Muslim Brotherhood, they are the forefathers' spiritual guidance of the Hamas movement. Indeed, Sheikh Hassan, founder of Hamas, began as Muslim Brotherhood, the sworn enemies of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. So in Egypt, Israel had a willing and able partner to negotiate with, one that desired peace with Israel. The reason Israel negotiated with Egypt in March of 1979 at the Camp David Accords is because Egypt was willing to accept Israel as a sovereign Jewish state along its border and also ensured that Israeli ships would have free and safe access to the Suez Canal. Because of its reasonableness and willingness to accept Israel as an equal, Israel was more than willing to make peace with Egypt. Hamas, however, is a far different beast. Hamas is not a national movement. They were not created to build or create a state for Palestinian people. Rather, their primary goal, after wiping Israel off the map, is to create a Muslim caliphate. And this position does not come from my mind, but from the mouths of many Hamas leaders and spokespeople, and is reduced to writing in their 1988 charter. The following are documented examples that clearly highlight Hamas's ideology. On July 12, 2018, a rally broadcast on Hamas's Al-Aqsa TV, Fatih Hamad, Hamas political bureau member and former minister of the Interior, stated that by 2022 the Palestinians would be rid of the Jewish filth and the Jewish cancer and called on the Arabs to shake off the Jewish control of their countries. He said, "We are looking forward to two important things which are within sight. The first is the cleansing of Palestine of the filth of the Jews and their uprooting from it. Allah willing, this is within sight. 4 years, my brothers. By 2022, we will be rid of them. The second thing is the establishment of the caliphate, and after the nation has been healed of its cancer, the Jews, Allah willing." Ika December 12, 2022 show on Al Masirah TV affiliated with the Yemeni Houthis senior Hamas official Mahmoud al-Zahar said, "When we speak about the army of Jerusalem and the battle of the promise of the hereafter, we are not talking about liberating our land alone. But we believe in what our Prophet Muhammad said, Allah drew the ends of the world near one another for my sake, and I have seen its eastern and western ends. The dominion of my nation would reach those ends that have been drawn near me. The entire 510 million square kilometers of planet Earth will come under a system where there is no injustice, no oppression, no treachery, no Zionism, no treacherous Christianity, and no killings and crimes like those being committed against the Palestinians and against the Arabs in all the Arab countries, in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq and other countries." Al-Masirah again, in a speech aired on Hamas Al-Aqsa TV on September 5, 2010, al-Zahar made similar remarks, saying, "Our enterprise extends far beyond Palestine. Palestine in its entirety, the Arab nation in its entirety, the Islamic nation in its entirety, and the entire world." A Hamas leader called Mashal, in an address he gave at the Al-Mirbit Mosque in Damascus, which was aired on Al Jazeera TV on February 3, 2006, stated that the Islamic nation will regain the leadership of the world, and then the West will be full of remorse when it is too late. Say, the Arab and Islamic nation is rising and awakening, and it will reach its peak, Allah willing. It will be victorious. It will link the present to the past. It will open up the horizons of the future. It will regain the leadership of the world, Allah willing. The day is not far off. In an April 9, 2011 interview with the Qatari Daily Al-Raya, top Hamas official Ahmad Bar, then Deputy Speaker of the Palestinian Legislative Council PLC, said that the Arab Spring uprisings against the dictatorships that the West had installed in the Arab countries heralded the establishment of an Islamic caliphate. He said, I would like to say that these revolutions are merely a prelude to the Islamic Caliphate, whose establishment the Prophet Muhammad foretold in the Hadith. You will have the prophecy according to Allah's will, then will he put an end to it according to his will, and then there will be a caliphate by way of prophecy according to the will of Allah, and there will be a biting kingdom, i.e. an oppressive rule according to the will of Allah, and then a kingdom of coercion according to the will of Allah, and there will be a caliphate by way of prophecy, etc. The term the kingdom of coercion, as the Hadith commentators explained, refers to the dictatorships that oppressed, cheated, killed, and destroyed. These were created by Western and American industry, which paved the way for the plundering of all the Muslim Ummah's resources, its oil and its agriculture. I hope that this awakening heralds the establishment of a caliphate by way of prophecy, according to the will of Allah. In a Friday sermon that aired on Hamas Al-Aqsa TV on April 11, 2008, Hamas MP and cleric Yunis Al-Astal said, "Very soon, Allah willing, Rome will be conquered, just like Constantinople was, as was prophesied by our Prophet Muhammad. Today, Rome is the capital of the Catholics, or the Crusader capital, which has declared its hostility to Islam and has planted the brothers of apes and pigs, i.e. the Jews in Palestine, in order to prevent the reawakening of Islam. This capital of theirs will be an advance post for the Islamic conquests, which will spread through Europe in its entirety, and then will turn to the two Americas and even Eastern Europe. I believe that our children or our grandchildren will inherit our jihad and our sacrifices, and Allah willing, the commanders of the conquest will come from among them. Today, we instill these good tidings in their souls, and by means of the mosques and the Quran books and the history of our prophets, his companions, and the great leaders, we prepare them for the mission of saving humanity from the hellfire on the brink of which they stand." Okay, after hearing directly from the mouths of Hamas and knowing what their written charter states, who in good faith truly believe that Hamas has any interest in allowing the state of Israel to exist, moral honesty requires that you answer in the negative. Hamas will never accept Israel to exist and is dedicated to annihilating it and driving it and all its people into the sea in order to revive a global Islamic caliphate to control the entire world. I also ask you to consider the question, how different is Hamas ideology from Nazi ideology? The two are strikingly similar. In summation, to sink the issue of peace between Israel and Hamas is a very simple, a very elementary issue, and that peace will come as soon as Israel decides to negotiate with Hamas, and the only thing slowing peace down is Israel's refusal to so negotiate. The dispositive problem with Cenk's position is that Hamas will never make peace with Israel because it's an ideology that is fundamentally premised upon two things: the destruction of Israel and wiping Jews off the face of the earth, and second, the creation of a global Islamic caliphate to dominate the entire planet. Hamas will never ideologically bend, thus making it impossible and undoubtedly meaningless for Israel to negotiate a peace with Hamas. The following is the opening statement of Mosab Hassan Yousef, in which he summarizes his position for why he believes Israel cannot negotiate a peace agreement with Hamas. Please listen closely.
Cenk, and now, Mosab, it is your turn again. You are answering no to the question, can Israel make peace with Hamas? Your chance to tell us why, please.
Well, absolutely not. Why? Because Hamas is not a political movement. Hamas is an ideological movement that wants to destroy Israel to build an Islamic state. And they don't stop there. Their political ambition, their religious ambition is beyond the river and the sea. They want a global khilafah. So how can you satisfy such ambition? The situation with Egypt, with Jordan, was completely different. Israel has no problem negotiating and making peace with the Arab world. Since its establishment, Israel extended its hand to make peace with the Arab world, but the Arab world rejected. Then the foundation of the Palestinian narrative is sitting on air. Because, first of all, there was no such thing as Palestine. If you look at Palestine, it's only an ideology, a very violent ideology. And it took the PLO 40 years to try to destroy the state of Israel, since 1948 until the early 90s, trying to destroy the state of Israel. Then they learned the lesson that violence was a dead end. And this is when Yasser Arafat came to negotiations, and Israel had no problem negotiating with Yasser Arafat. But what happened later? We had a new generation of Palestinians, Islamists this time, not the nationalists. And that's Hamas. And now they brought us back to square number one. And even Yasser Arafat and the other Palestinian first generation told Hamas, will it take you 40 years to realize that we're going nowhere? We cannot destroy Israel? And Hamas has been trying for the past 36 years, repeating the same mistakes of the PLO and Yasser Arafat. And Israel is caught up in this situation. Tomorrow we will have the communists coming. Then after that we will have more globalists, and could be any other foreign entity using the Palestinian cause as a device to just keep trying to destroy the only Jewish state on earth. So bottom line, Israel has no problem negotiating with Arabs, making peace with Arabs. Arabs are an ethnic group, and we have no problem. There are 2 million Arabs living in Israel. They are equal citizens, and they can get along with the Jewish people. But the problem that we're having, that Israel cannot coexist with destructive ideologies such as Palestine and Hamas, because those ideologies are black holes, and nobody can satisfy their ambitions.
Thank you.
On your screen is a summary of Mosab's arguments in support of his position that Israel cannot make peace with Hamas through negotiations. Mosab's points are clear and straightforward. First, Hamas's ideology is too extreme and will not bend, hence they will never negotiate with Israel in good faith. Hamas's ideology is based on two central tenets: one, that they are to annihilate Israel and the Jewish people, and two, once successful, they will rebuild a global Islamic caliphate to rule the world. With an ideology as extreme as this, it behooves one to imagine on what points Hamas would be willing to negotiate. Any rational mind will realize that ideologies such as Hamas are non-negotiable. Now, because I've already laid out support for Mosab's argument previously in this video wherein I rebutted Cenk's arguments, I will not bore you with rehashing all the evidence, but invite you to scroll back in the video to listen to the words of the many Hamas leaders over the years, and again ask yourself, would these people negotiate a peace with Israel? Would they ever acknowledge Israel as a sovereign state? The answer to both questions is a resounding no. I also invite you to view the following excerpts I took from Hamas's 1988 charter. Hamas's ideology is clear, ruthless, and apologetic, unwavering, and it's as extreme an ideology they come. And I think there is no reason to believe these Hamas leaders are not being honest with us when they tell us their plans for Israel, the Jews, and a global Islamic caliphate. Thank you for taking the time to view this video, and if you're still listening at this point, I again invite you to like and subscribe and to share this video with your friends and family. This information that I've assembled is meaningless unless it gets out to the people.